Hey friends, and welcome back to Sewing from Scratch. I am Kate, and this is where I teach you everything I know about sewing, and we learn more together along the way. Today's color block hack is one that I have been meaning to do for a long time and just kept putting it off. But today's the day because the current prompt for Sewing from Scratch is using inspiration to create something new using, of course, fabrics from your stash. If you don't have a single clue what I'm talking about with Shelf Sewing September, I will leave some links down below in the description box, but basically it's all about using what we have on hand to reduce our environmental footprint, sew with intention, and learn new skills. If that sounds pretty exciting to you, check out those links because you want to get entered in to win these amazing prize giveaways that we have thanks to the wonderful BIPOC designers that have sponsored this month's challenge. So now, what was my inspiration for this square color block? Well, a while back I was watching a really fun series on Netflix, and this is the inspiration photo. I really loved the square in the middle there, and while I could definitely do this on a woven fabric, and I do plan to make it match with the button down, I wanted to try it on something that I get a little more wear out of, like a crew neck, and here we are. I think this would even be really cool on a pair of pants, and I would be so thrilled if you took this tutorial and made something really cool from it. It doesn't even have to be the same shape. You could do something like this with triangles. Just try it out and tag me on Instagram so that I can see it and share it with everyone else in the community. One more quick thing to mention before we get into the actual tutorial is hit that little subscribe button. You can hit right down here on that little button there. You can click right on the video and subscribe that way, or you can click the actual red subscribe button down below. If it's red, that means you're not subscribed. And make sure you turn on the notification bells so you don't miss upcoming videos. And of course, thank you to all of you who are already subscribed. We can just get right into the video. So what you need for this tutorial are tracing paper, scissors, tape, rulers. I am using my quilting rule or my grid ruler. I highly recommend using yours if you have one. If not, I can link it down below in my Amazon favorites shop or somewhere else. You can definitely use any other ruler. This just makes it really easy to get parallel lines. You'll also need some sort of marking tool like a pen or a marker or a pencil. I will caution if you're using something thicker tipped like I will be in this video that you're not going to have as accurate of lines. You might want to use something more fine tipped like a pen or a pencil. And you need your pattern. The pattern that I'm using for this tutorial is the Ellie & Mac Fall in Love sweater, and of course I will have it linked below for you guys. I will say I should have gone at least one size bigger, possibly two. This is my size, but you'll see at the end why I kind of wish I would have went bigger. Now, you're also gonna need fabric, and this is a really great way to use up scrap fabric. So any like small pieces you have that you've been wanting to use up, maybe it was a really luxurious piece of something and you only have a small piece left and you can't really make anything else out of it. This is a great place to do it, or any color blocking ideas you can use scraps for as well. It's also a really fun way to use up pieces of fabric that aren't really stretchy. So you'll see in a minute what I'm using. The center block that I used is not stretchy. Like you can't really make a hoodie or anything like that out of it. Anything stretchy, a shirt, that kind of thing that you pull over your head. So I thought it would be great to stick it in the middle of this crew neck, and the limited stretch really didn't affect anything because it doesn't really need to stretch where I put it. And that being said, that piece of fabric and a couple others are upcycled from a make that I had done a while back, you might remember. So this was a way just to give a previous make some new life. Raid your closet, whatever you gotta do. Maybe you have something in your stash from the thrift store that you think would make a really good color block shirt. Grab that. Let's cut it up. And I wanted to say too that I am using different color fabrics on my shirt, but I think this would look really cool in all the same color, just with the different stitching lines, and then it'd be really fun to top stitch on that as well. Or you could also just choose one color, for example, gray, and use different fabrics that are all different shades of that color. I think that would look really fun and have like a really cool monochromatic type of look. Also, don't be afraid to use different fabrics. I really want to drive home the fact that in sewing there are a lot less rules than you may think, and kind of anything goes. So if you're really not sure about mixing different types of fabrics, what I will say is try and stick to similar weights of fabric. In the one that I made, I'm actually using 4 different types of fabrics, but they're all kind of that cozy, sweatery type feel. So they work together, and why not? Okay, let's get started. So the first thing you're going to need to do is to make your full front piece. You can't just use half of a piece. You want to achieve the look that we're going for, you want the full piece. So if you have larger paper, you can do this just by tracing one side of your pattern, flipping the pattern piece over, tracing the other side, making one big pattern piece. Or you can do like I'm having to do and trace out the pattern piece twice and then tape them together. You do want to make sure you're tracing and keeping the original piece. We're gonna be completely cutting this apart and totally hacking it, so you don't want your original pattern piece wrecked. If you are taping pieces together, just be careful that you don't crumple pieces or pieces don't get taped where they're not supposed to be. You want to maintain like a uniform shape all the way around the 4 sides of your piece. Now the next thing I'm doing is I'm making a square here on my front pattern piece, and I'm kind of just deciding how big I want this. Now, learn from my mistakes and kind of factor in your bust if you have a larger chest and are making a more fitted size. If you're making a larger size and it's not really going to show your curves, then don't worry about that. But just keep in mind that if the square goes over your bust or any other curves that you might have, that square might be skewed, and you might want to accommodate for that. I'm making my square 9 3/4 inches, so I would recommend measuring off the bottom hem because that's nice and straight and you can get a nice parallel line, figuring out kind of where you need to be there and making that your first starting line, and then drawing all your other lines parallel and perpendicular to that line. You also want to make sure that your lines extend all the way across your pattern piece so they reach the top, bottom, and both left and right sides. This is what's going to become your seam lines in the end. So now we can start adding in our cutting lines. Once you decide on your seam allowance, I'm going to use 1/4 inch. You're going to make lines on either side of your seam lines that distance away. So again, I am using 1/4 inch. I'm making lines to the left and right of my original seam line, which is black, and I am making these new lines in red. And it actually turns out that you don't need the outer lines. So if you just draw the lines to the inside of the square, then if you do that all the way around, then I think you should be good. You shouldn't need the outside lines. So now I have this craziness of lines going on here, and I'm gonna decide how I want my color blocking to be. So I want it to kind of wrap around each other and not overlap, if that makes sense. So I'm showing with X's on where we are not going to cut, and then those are going to be my actual pieces that I'm showing there. We're gonna end up cutting around that square that we made on the inner red line. So in the end, you'll be left with a square that is 1/2 inch smaller on all 4 sides than you want. So each of your outer pieces, you'll be cutting along the one edge to account. So you'll have your black seam line, and then that red line is your cut line, and then on one end you'll end up cutting all of it off, so we'll need to be adding seam allowance to that, which we're gonna do in a minute. So now, because we cut away from the pattern pieces, we need to add that back along with seam allowance so that we can attach our pieces all together when it's time, without losing the size of the shape of the garment. So for 1/4 inch seam allowance, we're going to be adding 1/2 inch to those edges that we cut everything off of, as well as 1/2 inch to each side of that center square. You can either do this by taping on paper to your square sides and adding 1/2 inch, or you can take your original measurement of 9 3/4 by 9 3/4 and add 1/4 inch to each side, meaning that each measurement will get 1/2 inch bigger. So 10 1/4 by 10 1/4 will be your new square. That includes your seam allowance. Now, cut out all your fabric pieces, making sure that your paper pattern pieces are all right side up when you're cutting on your fabric that is also right side up. You want everything to be faced the correct way. Now, next step isn't 100% necessary, but it can be helpful as we go through the tutorial. So go ahead and mark 1/4 inch your stitch lines on the back of all your pattern pieces, wherever they're going to be joining with another piece. Now comes the tricky bit, and that is sewing. So essentially we are making a whole new front piece, putting a bunch of different pieces together to make one front piece, and then we're just going to construct it like a regular top. So this isn't as complicated as you might think until we get to the last piece, but let's start with the first one. So take your center square and your top piece and lay them right sides together, aligning those raw edges. You want to make sure that you're aligning the piece so that the next piece that you're joining up will have a nice straight edge to seam to. So on one side you're going to end up with a tail, and the other side should be nice and straight for the next piece. Go ahead and stitch that. You can either baste it first on your sewing machine or just go straight to your serger. If your pieces got a little wonky in your cutting just from inaccuracies, make sure you're always lining up with the square as long as your square is true, and then you can kind of trim things off after if necessary. You'll see this shoulder piece kind of got wonky here. I'm just going to trim it off after. It is the same length as the other side, so it's really not going to be an issue. Press it away from that square and top stitch if you want. Next, you're going to grab the piece that lines up with the straight edge that you just made and attach that kind of the same way. We want to make sure that we're lining up with that bottom square so that the next piece has a nice straight edge to attach to. Where you already had your seam, make sure that the seam allowance that you stitched before is flipped the right way, so we want it to be away from the square. Continue to the next piece, making the same process with the straight edge. Now when we get to the last piece, it's a bit different. So here's how things are looking on the back with all the seams. And you'll notice we have to add our last piece along 2 edges now. It doesn't really matter what you do first, but I'm gonna do the long edge. We still wanna be aligning with that square in the middle. So along the top, that means the edge of the original square that we have already seamed in that first piece. Since we've already seamed it, you need to find the original edge of it. Again, this is gonna kind of look like a little sandwich when you're doing that. So make sure you're leaving a 1/4 inch overhang so that you're able to attach that little tail from the first piece to the last piece once we do this seam. The sewing can be made easier on this if you first tack or baste down that inner corners so it doesn't move on you and you end up having to seam rip because you lost your seam allowance. Ask me how I know. All right, and that's it. So now you have one full front piece and you can just construct your garment like you normally would. Before I show you the total reveal, again, keep in mind that I should have gone a size or 2 up here. This is just what I'm working with. I am happy with the results. I will wear this a lot. The square just doesn't look like as much like a square as it does when it's flat, if you know what I mean. So as usual, thank you so much for staying to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was fun and new and fresh and funky. That was kind of my goal with this. So yeah, get making and make sure you tag me on Instagram. Hey everyone who has stayed to the end. It is time for PS with Kate. So I don't have too much to say. We're kind of in a rush today, but I did want to mention we had a garage sale this weekend. I got rid of some stuff. There's some stuff that I'm gonna just post online, and whatever doesn't go is getting donated. But I wanna know, have you ever had a garage sale, and do you find it a lot of work? Because I felt when I was like setting up for the garage sale, I was like in my element. I was totally in the zone. I loved just organizing things and getting them ready and just imagining them going to a different home, or more so just getting out of my home. And I kind of made the joke to my husband, like, I should do this for a living. I should set up garage sales for people, but not like, I wouldn't actually run the garage sale. I would just set the stuff out and maybe help them price it if they wanted help with that, but maybe not, because I kind of price things cheaply, I think. But I also do emotional pricing. So if it was like my kid's favorite baby blanket or the cutest pair of shoes, the prices were always higher than the rest of the things of equal value. I don't know, just me. Have you ever had a garage sale? Do you like having garage sales? I really don't know that I love having a garage sale, but the actual setup of having to do it, I really liked. And I think it's just because it's organizing and I just love to organize. Thanks for listening to me talk about my love of organizing. I'll catch you in the next video. Bye.